Taleen Sorrel never imagined that spending one weekend at her best friend Vanna Howlett's house would unravel a secret so dark. It would shatter families, friendships, and an entire community. Vanna's father, Grant Howlett, was the kind of man everyone trusted, respected, admired, and deeply involved in their children's school. But beneath his polished image hid a terrifying truth that only began to surface when Taleen noticed something strange during an innocent sleepover. What began as quiet suspicion would soon expose a horrifying affair, a web of surveillance, and the shocking betrayal of a daughter's trust by the man she called Dad. In the quiet, tree-lined streets of Elmridge Hills, everything appeared peaceful. The lawns were manicured, the mailboxes polished, and the neighbors friendly in a distant, respectful way. Among the many beautiful homes stood the Howlett residence, modern, elegant, and admired by everyone who passed it. To outsiders, it was a symbol of perfection, much like the family who lived inside. Grant Howlett was a successful architect, known for designing luxury homes across the state. He was charming, well-dressed, and always knew what to say to make people feel comfortable. His wife, Mireya, was a well-known socialite who filled her calendar with charity events and upscale fundraisers. Together, they were the kind of couple people envied, not just for their wealth, but for their apparent happiness. Their daughter, Vanna Howlett, was 17, and in her final year at Winslow Academy, a private school for elite students. Vanna was admired by her peers for her intelligence and kindness. She excelled in academics, participated in theatre, and captained the debate team. To everyone who knew her, Vanna was the image of balance, focused, thoughtful, and gracious. She had a close circle of friends who were just as brilliant and promising as she was. Jexa Maddox was the bold one, an edgy, artistic girl with streaks of blue in her hair and a sharp mind that loved breaking the rules. Taleen Nix, niece of the school principal, was quiet but clever, always observing more than she said. Then, there was Brianna Cade, the introverted daughter of a state senator, who kept to herself but was fiercely loyal to her friends. These four girls were inseparable. Whether it was studying for exams, going out for coffee, or hanging out on weekends, they were almost always together. Their favorite place to gather was Vanna's house. The Howlett home was spacious, full of comforts most teens could only dream of. An indoor pool, a home theatre, a rooftop garden. Grant and Mireya often welcomed the girls, encouraging Vanna to bring her friends over rather than go out. It was seen as a safer option, and the girls appreciated the freedom it gave them. At first, everything felt normal. The girls would laugh, over movies, experiment with makeup, and take hundreds of selfies in front of the mirror-lined walls. Grant often popped in to say hello, offering snacks or asking how their schoolwork was going. His presence seemed harmless, even friendly. The girls liked him. He wasn't like other dads. He was laid back, funny, and always seemed to know what teenagers liked. He made playlists they enjoyed, gave surprisingly good advice about school projects, and even joined their conversations about college applications. But underneath his friendly facade, something darker stirred. Grant began paying a bit more attention to the girls. He remembered what kind of candy each one liked, complimented their clothes, and lingered longer in conversations. It wasn't enough to raise alarm, but just enough to feel strange. He'd touch a shoulder, lean in too close, or make personal jokes that left the girls quietly glancing at each other. Mireya, too busy with her charity work, hardly noticed, and Vanna, used to her dad being overly friendly, brushed it off. Gradually, the girls started noticing small things. Jexa once found her bag moved from where she'd left it. Taleen discovered someone had scrolled through her phone photos. Brianna caught a glimpse of Grant watching them swim from the second-floor balcony, his expression unreadable. But these moments came and went, leaving behind only mild discomfort and unanswered questions. The real turning point came when Grant suggested setting up extra security cameras around the house. He claimed it was to keep the family safe. Rising crime rates, he said. Mireya agreed, and Vanna didn't question it. But the cameras weren't just outside or in common spaces. Some were hidden in the guest bedrooms. One was placed above the indoor pool. Another faced the hallway outside Vanna's room. No one noticed at first. The cameras were expertly hidden, wired into the house's existing smart system, and still the girls kept coming over, unaware that the walls around them had begun to close in. What started as innocent hospitality was slowly evolving into something more calculated, something sinister. Grant watched everything unfold from his office on the 3rd floor, where all camera feeds were routed. He began spending more time in that room than anywhere else. Each night, he observed the recordings. He knew when they laughed. He knew when they cried. He was no longer just a father. He was something else entirely. Summer arrived in Elmridge Hills with warmth and long golden evenings, and the Howlett household became more lively than ever. With school on break, Vanna and her 3 closest friends spent more time together, often turning the Howlett home into their personal getaway. The large backyard transformed into a place of sunbathing, card games, and late-night conversations under fairy lights. The girls practically lived there, drawn by the comfort, privacy, and luxury that Vanna's home provided. But as the days stretched lazily forward, the line between safety and surveillance began to fade, though no one realized it at first. Grant Howlett took full advantage of the summer break. Under the guise of being a relaxed and cool dad, he made the house even more welcoming to Vanna's friends. He started buying treats the girls liked without being asked. Imported chocolates, flavored sodas, fancy skincare products. He paid close attention to their preferences, even when they never told him directly. It wasn't just generosity, it was obsession disguised as hospitality. To deepen his illusion of harmlessness, Grant suggested regular movie nights in the home theater. He bought new streaming subscriptions and ordered beanbags so the girls could lounge more comfortably. On some nights, he joined them for the film, laughing along, offering snacks, and subtly inserting himself into their world. What seemed like friendliness was actually control. Grant wasn't just a presence in the house. He was becoming part of the group, slowly weaving himself into the lives of teenage girls who still trusted him. What none of the girls knew was that the security system Grant had upgraded months ago now functioned as his personal surveillance network. The guest rooms where they slept were bugged with tiny cameras hidden inside smoke detectors and picture frames. He watched from his home office, reviewing hours of footage daily. He memorized their routines, observed their changing moods, and listened in on every whispered conversation. It gave him a twisted sense of power. He believed he was close to them, as if watching them made him part of their lives in a way that no one else understood. One night, during a sleepover, Brianna had a panic attack. The lights had just gone out when she quietly left the guest bedroom and went downstairs for air. She hadn't told anyone, but she'd felt uncomfortable earlier that evening when Grant had stood too close while handing her a drink. She shook it off, not wanting to be dramatic. But her instincts had been right. As she stood in the kitchen trying to calm down, Grant followed her in. He spoke to her softly, placing a hand on her back, then tried to lead her toward the hallway. She pulled away and hurried back upstairs. What happened in those few tense minutes wasn't known to the other girls, and Brianna didn't mention it. She convinced herself it was a misunderstanding. But what Grant didn't realize was that someone else had been recording too. Jexa, who had a reputation for being creative and suspicious of authority, had been working on a summer art project, an abstract video installation she called Private Spaces. As part of it, she had installed a tiny camera in her backpack that she occasionally positioned in rooms she stayed in. She had already noticed strange things, like her toothbrush being moved and her personal diary flipped to the wrong page. Her camera, positioned inside a book on a shelf, captured footage that night in the hallway. It showed Grant following Brianna into the kitchen and trying to touch her in a way that didn't seem fatherly. Jexa didn't know what to do with the footage. She spent days analyzing it, debating whether she should go to the police, the school, or even Maria. But fear held her back. Who would believe her? Grant was wealthy, respected, and articulate. Brianna hadn't even told anyone. Taleen had noticed tension in Brianna's behavior, but said nothing. Varna was oblivious, still believing her father was just generous and kind. Eventually, Yexa decided on a plan of her own. She approached Grant directly, showing him a still frame from the footage. She didn't make threats, she didn't scream, but her eyes told him everything. She knew, and she expected something in return for her silence. What began as a father's perverse game had now turned into a dangerous negotiation. Yexa asked for money, weekly payments in cash. She called it an insurance policy. Grant, caught off guard, agreed without protest. He had more to lose than anyone, and for now, Yexa had the upper hand. But in the shadows of that perfect house, the power dynamics had shifted. Secrets were no longer contained. Trust was unraveling. And what none of them yet realized was that one of them, quiet, observant Brianna, had become more entangled in Grant's world than any of them could have imagined. As summer wore on, the air inside the Howlett residence grew heavier with tension, though no one spoke of it directly. Vanna continued to host her friends, still unaware of the storm quietly unfolding around her. Yexa remained calm on the surface, keeping her leverage over Grant like a blade pressed against his secrets. She received the cash as promised, delivered in envelopes hidden in old books or slipped into her backpack without a word. But what she hadn't expected was how quickly the arrangement would unravel from her control. Grant, after the initial shock of being confronted, regained his composure. His mind worked in architectural precision, always planning, always analyzing structure. He knew Yexa had footage, but he also knew how to manipulate people. He began studying her more closely, not through cameras this time, but in real life. He watched how she reacted when he spoke, how her eyes shifted during conversations, how her confidence frayed ever so slightly when she was alone. He noted her patterns, her weaknesses. Grant decided she was dangerous, but not invincible. Meanwhile, Brianna grew more distant from the group. Her usual silence deepened into withdrawal. She no longer stayed the night during sleepovers and often excused herself early from get-togethers. She hadn't told anyone what happened in the kitchen with Grant, but the memory lingered like a bruise beneath the surface. She began having nightmares, images of corridors, locked doors, and Grant's expressionless face watching her. Her parents noticed the change, but assumed it was the pressure of college admissions. At school, she kept her head down. Her once tight bond with Varna loosened quietly, without confrontation. Taleen, ever observant, noticed all of it. She had always been a listener, someone who absorbed information like a sponge. When Brianna pulled away, Taleen started paying closer attention. She reviewed old texts, recalled conversations, and sensed there was something unspoken between her friends. She remembered the way Yexa had once glanced at Grant with more hate than fear, and how Brianna had trembled during a sleepover after a trip to the kitchen. Taleen didn't have proof, only instincts, but her gut told her something was wrong. One afternoon, she stayed behind after a visit to the Howlett's house. While Vanna went to her room and the others left, Taleen wandered the hallways alone. She wasn't snooping, just thinking. Then, she noticed a faint buzzing noise coming from behind a mirror in the guest room. It was subtle, easy to miss. She pressed her ear against the wall and heard a soft, mechanical hum. Curious, she opened a cabinet nearby and found wires tucked behind folded towels. Something clicked in her mind. Taleen didn't speak a word, but she took a photo of the wires before slipping out of the room. That night, she began researching home surveillance systems, learning how security cameras could be installed discreetly. The deeper she went, the more disturbed she became. She pieced together a theory that chilled her. Cameras, secret recordings, unusual behavior from Brianna, a cash arrangement she had overheard between Yexa and Grant during a brief, hushed exchange on the staircase. She didn't know the full picture, but what she did know was that Grant Howlett was not who he claimed to be. Grant, however, was already moving into the next phase of his twisted plan. Yexa's blackmail had triggered something in him, a need to reassert control. He began planting stories, He told Mireya that Yexa was unstable, had been caught stealing at school, and might be influencing Vana negatively. He even met with the school counselor under the pretense of being a concerned parent, hinting that Yexa might be a danger to herself. Slowly, he tried to poison everyone's perception of her, building a case in silence. Yexa started feeling the shift almost immediately. Teachers treated her differently. Mireya stopped greeting her. Even Vana, confused and unaware, asked fewer questions when Yexa skipped a sleepover. The walls were closing in, but Yexa didn't back down. She made copies of the footage, encrypted them, and mailed one copy to herself at a different address. She knew what kind of man Grant was now, calculating, dangerous, and untouchable. But what Yexa hadn't predicted was that someone else, someone she hadn't trusted, was now quietly gathering the final pieces of the puzzle. Taleen was ready to confront the truth, even if no one else was. What she found in that house haunted her, but it also gave her purpose. She decided she would expose the truth, not for revenge, not for Yexa, but for Brianna, whose silence was loudest of all. The first day of autumn crept into Elmridge Hills unnoticed, bringing colder winds and sharper shadows. The summer had vanished, leaving behind silence where laughter once echoed. Vanna sensed something was off, but she couldn't name it. Her circle of friends had thinned. Sleepovers no longer happened. The group chats were quiet. Even her once bright and warm home now felt cold. She didn't realize that the foundation beneath her life was starting to crack. Taleen had become the unseen force working in the background. The photo she'd taken of the wires in the guest room wasn't enough on its own. She needed more. She wanted to build a story that no one could ignore. In secret, she returned to the Howlett house under the pretense of dropping off a textbook. Instead, she explored. This time she brought a hidden audio recorder and her phone on silent mode. She found a locked door at the end of the basement hallway. She'd never seen it open before. From the look of the electronic keypad on it, it wasn't just a storage room. In the following days, she reached out to an older cousin who worked in cybersecurity. She showed him the photo of the wires and described the door, though she didn't say names. He gave her suggestions: how to detect recording devices, how to trace IP addresses, and how to check if files had been stored externally. Taleen returned again, this time alone, while Vanna and her parents were out. She used a frequency scanner and located multiple active signals coming from guest rooms, the hall bathroom, and the basement. What she discovered was terrifying. Grant had created a surveillance network, covert, continuous, and methodical. Taleen knew she couldn't handle this alone anymore. She reached out to Yexa, showing her everything she had gathered: photos, signal logs, locations of devices. For the first time, Yexa let her guard down. She shared her own evidence: the hallway footage, the cash payments, the fear. The two girls realized they were connected by something far darker than friendship. They were survivors of a predator who had disguised himself as a father, a neighbor, a man of status. While they planned their next move, Grant was busy dismantling the trail. He suspected someone had been in the house. One camera showed Taleen slipping into the hallway alone. Another recorded her holding her phone toward a wall. He began wiping footage, scrubbing metadata, and removing some of the physical devices. But he was too late. The girls already had what they needed. At the same time, Brianna began writing in her journal again. Every entry was short, but raw. She detailed the kitchen incident, the stairs, the dreams that haunted her. She still hadn't told anyone, but the act of writing brought her clarity. One day, after school, she overheard a teacher talking about a police inquiry into inappropriate staff conduct at another school. It gave her an idea. Without telling anyone, she slipped her journal entries into an envelope, added a single sentence, "I don't feel safe around Grant Howlett," and mailed it anonymously to the school board. The ripple effect was immediate. The board launched a quiet internal inquiry. They didn't inform the Howletts, but started looking into Grant's activity on school committees. A retired tech consultant on the board noticed something odd: a series of external IP logins from The Howlett home accessing staff-only databases, he flagged it. The school began coordinating with a local detective for discreet observation. The tipping point came when Taleen's cousin managed to trace a hidden cloud backup of Grant's surveillance files. Hundreds of hours of footage were stored, silent, time-stamped, labeled by room and subject. Some showed Brianna crying alone. Others captured girls changing, brushing their teeth, sleeping. The material was horrifying. Taleen and Jexa packaged the most incriminating clips with their notes and sent them, this time not anonymously, to the school board, the police, and a lawyer Jexa's mother once hired during a property dispute. The silence didn't last long. 2 days later, police vehicles arrived outside the Howlett residence at dawn. Neighbors stared as officers entered the pristine home and walked Grant out in handcuffs. Mireya screamed, demanding to know what was happening. Vanna watched from the stairs, frozen, her world collapsing in slow motion. None of them could have prepared for what was coming. The arrest wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a deeper unraveling, one that would expose not only a father's betrayal, but a web of secrets no one had dared to question before. The arrest sent shockwaves through Elmridge Hills. Whispers turned to headlines, and headlines evolved into public outcry. The town, known for its calm streets and community barbecues, was suddenly the center of a scandal that horrified everyone. Parents pulled their children from school, news vans parked outside the Howlett home, and Vanna's world shattered under the weight of a truth too monstrous to understand. Vanna hadn't cried when the police took her father away. She had stood motionless, clutching the staircase rail, watching the man she adored, her protector, her role model, led away in handcuffs. Nothing made sense. Her mother, Mireya, had broken down completely. She screamed at the officers, demanding answers. But even she seemed unsure whether to fight or fall apart. Vanna's phone exploded with messages, most of them confusing or pitying. No one had answers, only rumors. Inside the police department, investigators worked around the clock to organize and review the evidence submitted by Taleen and Jexa. The cloud archive alone contained enough footage to justify a dozen felony charges. Several of the videos clearly violated state laws on privacy, surveillance, and, more seriously, exploitation. Grant had installed cameras in intimate places, recorded underage girls, and catalogued the content meticulously. His obsession with control had become his downfall. Taleen, for her part, kept a low profile. Her parents, once oblivious, now saw her in a new light. They'd known she was bright and curious, but not that she'd been quietly dismantling a predator's empire. Jexa stayed off social media and communicated only with her lawyer. Her story, once hidden behind defiance and silence, now became the backbone of the case. With her footage and financial records, prosecutors built a timeline of blackmail, abuse of power, and grooming. What no one expected was Brianna's journal. After the school board received it, they contacted the police and handed over the handwritten pages. The journal added a haunting layer to the investigation. Her descriptions, though simple, painted a vivid picture of emotional trauma. She had never spoken a word out loud, but through ink and paper, she told a story of fear, confusion, and betrayal that deeply moved the legal team. As the case gained traction, other students quietly came forward. A sophomore girl admitted she once saw Grant lurking near the bathrooms during a school event. Another said she always felt uncomfortable at the Howlett house, but couldn't explain why. While not every story held legal weight, they revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that had gone unnoticed for years. Mireya's world imploded. She moved out of the house within a week and filed for divorce almost immediately. Her community turned cold. Friends stopped returning her calls. Mothers who once invited her to brunch now avoided eye contact at the store. She issued a public statement claiming ignorance and distancing herself from her husband's actions. But few believed she'd known nothing at all. Vanna remained quiet through it all. Her teachers excused her from school. She sat in her room for days, staring at the same walls where her friends once laughed, where secrets festered behind every mirror and vent. She avoided Jexa, Taleen, and Brianna, not out of anger, but shame. She couldn't reconcile her father's two faces, the loving dad who kissed her forehead every night, and the man who had betrayed everything decent in their lives. The trial began 2 months after the arrest. Cameras weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but the public waited outside every day. Grant pled not guilty at first, hoping to suppress the footage on legal grounds, but with overwhelming evidence and the testimony of the girls, his defense crumbled. He changed his plea to guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. Still, the court sentenced him to over 30 years without parole. Jexa, Taleen, and Brianna didn't attend the final hearing. They had already said what they needed to say in written statements. Instead, they moved forward quietly. Therapy, new routines, and long stretches of silence became their new reality. Varna transferred schools and changed her last name, trying to reclaim a life untouched by her father's legacy. The Howlett house was sold and eventually torn down. No one wanted to live inside those walls. A new family would one day build on that land, unaware of what had happened before them. But for those who knew the truth, the story never fully ended. It lingered like an echo of a father's monstrous secrets and the girls who refused to let the silence protect him.